most of my career was in retail until the library, but a lot of that was in bookstores, so that was really awesome. I always wrote. I think by the time I was 25, I had like handwritten 4 different books. But then I stopped. I stopped writing it down, and then I got married, I had kids, my career took off, and I didn't start, I still made up stories in my head, but I didn't put them on paper. And then once our kids were able to drive, my husband and I decided to reclaim some of our hobbies, and that was the one that I wanted to do. And I found an amazing critique partner, and you know, I subbed to some publishers, but then she's like, well, I'm just gonna do self-publishing. So she went first, and so all I had to do was copy what she did. And so now I have, I'm working on the 3rd book in the series, and I also have a historical that's under consideration with a publisher. But yeah, it's just definitely part-time.
Why don't you maybe introduce kind of your unique genres or your focuses, and maybe tell us about your characters and about the series, and maybe leading up to the reading.
Okay, I write, currently I write paranormal romance, I'm trying to represent as many on the LGBTQ plus spectrum as possible. Right now, the couples are lesbian. I write about vampire, fae, and wolf shifters because I like reading them, and Charlene Harris and Janine Frost and Ian Frost and just Patricia Briggs. My wife remembers. I can't remember names of authors, which was really fun teaching. Book titles and names of authors, no idea. It was the yellow cover. That one, someone did that. Yeah. So I read those, and I really wanted to be in the books, and I didn't see myself in the books, and so I started writing as if I was in one of those books, and it just kept going. So I have a trilogy, 2 of which are written and published. I am working on the spin-off that comes between 2 and 3. Is in the same world, is in line with what's happening in the trilogy, but can be read by itself, or not read, and the trilogy still works. I'm gonna please everybody, so we'll see how that works out. And then I'm not sure where I'm going after that, but yeah, I will have one more spin-off of another character, because there's a couple of characters that I just love the people I'm writing about. I love them and hate them. So, you know, I love killing off the ones I hate. That's so much fun. Heinously kill them. And then the ones that I, you know, think so much of, like when I had to, for the story, she had to leave, but I can't let her go. So I'm finding out what to do with her. So anyway, I'm going to read from my first book, The Warrior Within.
Okay. So I write romantic suspense, and there's 2 out of the 4 that have been published so far, and it concerns the DAG team, and it was formed by 2 former CIA operatives and a hacker, and so they kind of contract with the government, so the government stuff they can't do legally, and it's more of like hacking and going undercover to steal information, stuff like that. Not too dangerous. And in the first book, the person that works for them is Meg, but, it starts out in, Kit, the main female character, her point of view. And I jumped around a little bit in the first chapter, so, but it starts off, this trip had to be in her top 10 list of bad ideas, Kit realized as she blazed up at the starry sky. Well, she relented. The idea itself had been solid, it was just that it had not provided the solution she had hoped for. A week alone in the woods, hiking and camping, was supposed to give her insight into what to do with her upended life. She had hoped to reclaim the part of herself that she had misplaced this last year, the part that made good choices with sound judgments. That innate trust in herself and taking a beating she had been woefully wrong about somebody. Friends understood that she needed this trip to reclaim herself. She needed to prove to herself that her instincts were still functional, that believing in one wrong person did not mean her gut was faulty. Despite her skills, people had cautioned against this John. However, Kit had been adamant. In order to think, she needed to be alone. It wasn't as if she didn't have backcountry experience. She'd led several camping expeditions on this very trail. Since it was off-season, she'd assumed she might pass a handful of hikers, but so far she'd been alone, which was what she thought she had needed. So she's bummed out, and she's gonna just turn around and go home the next morning. And then she heard the helicopter long before she spotted it. The whirl of blades was thunderous. As it came closer, she watched the branches overhead twist violently, loose leaves fluttering down to land around her boots. She tried to identify the bird, but the tree canopy around the campsite was too high for her to see it. What the hell was it doing flying so low over the isolated forest? It could be a rescue team searching for a stranded hiker. She had trekked through the eastern half of the forest for the past week and hadn't seen a single flare or even a remote sign that anyone else was near. Only an idiot who deserved to get lost would venture this far out without emergency flares. She pulled a well-worn topography map out of the side pocket of her pack and studied it. There should be a clearing up on the left. That had to be where the helicopter would touch down. If it was a rescue operation, she was trained to help. Adrenaline flowed through her veins and she laughed. Finally, a distraction. Stowing the map in her pocket, she scrambled to find her first aid. She gets to the clearing. Something wasn't right. The helicopter, there was no rescue agency markings on the outside. The expensive-looking machine was all black and shiny like the forewings of a beetle. The sun reflected off the window, so she could not see how many people were inside. Goosebumps rose on her arms as the theme to the Twilight Zone played in her head. Whether it was her overactive imagination or not, she wanted to remain hidden now. She peeked back to see the helicopter hovering about 20 feet off the ground. Thankfully, it was also now facing away from her. Her eyes narrowed as she noticed that even the tail lacked any identifying numbers. Not a good sign, Kit thought, and then watched as horror as a body tumbled out the open door. It landed in the meadow with a thump, and the helicopter flew away. So even though her heart was about to burst out of her chest, she knew she had to at least find out if the person was still alive. True, they could be dangerous, but there was no way she could just leave. She slipped off the backpack and pulled a small canister of pepper spray out of the side pocket. There was also a coil of tent rope there. So, better to be prepared, she thought. So she goes up and approaches the person. There was dried blood on his chin and he was sporting a black eye. That and his busted lip might have happened earlier, judging by the color and the swelling. The guy had taken a beating, but he was still breathing. She could see the rise and fall of his chest under a gray t-shirt. Her own breath whooshed out in relief. She inched closer, still holding out the pepper spray, her fingers steady on the trigger. She nudged his shoulder with the toe of her hiking boot. She took a deep breath, ready to run if he should suddenly grab her. The man groaned in response and turned his head to face the bright blue sky. Kit made an involuntary panic noise when she saw the other side of his face covered in fresh blood. So she ties him up and goes back to get her first aid kit and starts working to find out why he's bleeding. She needed to stop reading so many mysteries and thrillers. While her reality seemed surreal now, she had not imagined the helicopter. As far as she knew, it could be headed back to them right now. Discarding the gauze she had been using to wipe his face, she laid her hand on his chest and shook him. His muscles moved under her hand as he coughed. The man groaned, and this time he noticed his eyelash flicker. She held her breath as his eyes slowly opened. They squinted up into the bright morning sky before shifting to her. Wow, Kit thought as she reached for the pepper spray with her free hand. Gorgeous eyes. There were a few shades darker than the sky and framed with dark lashes. Even though one eye was bruised and puffy, they were still striking. As they met her, she was held in place by his gaze as he studied her in confusion. And then you switched to Nick's head. Excruciating pain in his body dropped Nick slowly back to consciousness. His senses quickly told him he was outside. He smelled clean air and dirt. He heard leaves fluttering and the far-off cry of a bird. Bright light pulsed behind his eyelids, signaling it was daytime. Good Lord, where was he? The last thing he recalled was fighting with Peck's goons. That had been at night in downtown Chicago. He must be far from there since there were no sounds of humans at all. How long had he been out? How injured was he? So he's like finally opening his eyes and checking himself out. What he hadn't sensed was the woman hovering over him. She looked terrified, so she was not an immediate threat. He blinked, trying to bring her into focus. That action caused one eye to throb, and he recalled the last mighty blow that had knocked him out. Are you okay? The mystery woman's voice quivered. Nerves, he surmised. She tilted her head, causing the bill of her cap to block the sunshine from his eyes. And then he's like checking her out and trying to figure out where he is and where the bloody hell was he? The sky above him was a bright, cloudless blue. No buildings in sight, just trees. His stomach sank. This was not Chicago.